Too many leaders lead for validation, not impact, for what they can get out of it more than what they can give to it. Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm obsessed with how leaders grow and develop, and I too have insecure moments. We all do. Glad you're here with me now on the Sight Shift podcast so you can learn how to lead for impact, not validation.
Hey, well, welcome to the Sight Shift podcast. I'm Mark Stanifer, joined by my colleague, Chris McAllister. Chris, good to see you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
We're doing it a little different.
We are.
Yeah. So I'm going to take maybe a little bit more of a lead role here to get us started. And part of the reason why we're doing that is because new book, Lead for Impact, is having impact. And we thought it would be a good opportunity using the podcast to just work through some of the key content of the book. And we'll cover things that are in the book. We'll cover things that aren't in the book, but associated with the book. But we're gonna work through a series of episodes, this being the first one, covering Lead for Impact, our book. So you ready?
I'm excited because, and you know this already, by the time you put it in print, you're still, I tend to go to the next books, but you're still advancing, right, in your head. So no doubt some of that will probably emerge.
Let's advance away.
Yeah.
So we'll probably mostly follow the order of the book, the outline of the book. We're certainly going to start at the beginning. And so as we think about the big ideas of this book, let's set that stage. And even before we get to like the really big question that continues to mess me up, by the way, we'll get to that in this episode. You start the book with a story of someone that we're calling Sam. So set the table, if you will, for our viewers, for our listeners, of Sam and what's going on in his life.
Yeah, so thank you, because if you would have said the opening story, truthfully, I would have been like, I don't remember which is the opening story. But with that prompt, I'm like, I totally remember. And you'd be like, Chris, aren't you passionate about it? It's like, yeah, but 9 books in, whatever it is, we probably combined with the coaches portal, 20 something plus courses, a lot of journeys out there where you're telling stories and moving people to different places. So thank you. But the idea being, the person that we're interacting with all the time as we serve larger organizations, we're just referring to them as Sam. Sam is at a place, he knows it can be better deep down. He feels that. Maybe he's never experienced it. Maybe he has experienced it and he's trying to get it back there. But it's this place where the culture is really powerful and it's healthy and things work better when he's not there. And the team is really gelled and performing and aligned. And this doesn't mean that everything's copacetic. It just means that they're working through their insecurities together and getting better. And so what we're looking at is this kind of person who cares about his people, who wants to advance the business, but is trying to do the stuff that he knows best. But in reality, it falls short. And so you kind of have 2 attempts that they make, which I can get into to fix it. Okay, so the first attempt is they're just bringing a lot of their direction or enthusiasm. Like, we're going to get the big retreat and we're going to come together. We're going to have the powwow and I'm going to deliver this talk or this idea or whatever it is. It's that thing that you're like, this will be the silver bullet. And the silver bullet is never the silver bullet. It just doesn't work that way. If that would fix everything, it wouldn't stick anyway. The second piece that they try is then bringing in somebody where they're going, okay, if we have this right, like, peak bonding experience, then we'll start, our communication issues will work out. We'll start responding to change in a healthy way. And we make fun of those moments because,
the trust falls.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and people crack up when I tell this story, but if I'm like, my wife and I were having this fight and we just weren't resolving it, and I just put my hand on her shoulder and it was like, hey, babe, companies do this when people are stuck. Let's do a trust fall right now. Of course, anybody that's been in a long-term relationship knows that doesn't do jack. So why would we think that in these team environments, some of this silliness would fix substantive issues?
Yeah. It's funny. I was just thinking, I have a great marriage. coming up on 29 years,
Congrats.
right? Like that's and
huge.
the wife and I were just talking about this past weekend, and I mean it's been work. It's
Yeah.
always a challenge.
Oh,
but
so great didn't mean easy and coasting into.
no, but we've gotten to this point without ever having done a trust fall.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if you're wondering, the answer is yes. You can get here without trust fall.
That's
What
great.
I hear in your description of Sam, not just the characteristics, but the symptoms of pain that he's experiencing, and then looking to things like the gimmicky or the shiny object or the trust fall, like ways to treat the symptom without really getting to the underlying root cause, which is where things are really happening and need to be treated.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like, and leaders have to work through this. And these are well-intended leaders. People sometimes are like, well, what about toxic leaders? Well, if they want to change, they can go through dramatic transformation. We see it. Bring us your hardest cases. We're on for it. But the idea is, a lot of leaders try to solve it almost like they do try to solve a marriage situation. If we just talk about it more, it'll fix it. When in reality, not to discourage you, but statistically, marriage counseling doesn't work. Like it's more likely to hurt the relationship because you end up like sitting and stewing in each other's struggles and insecurities, not really learning to see things from a whole perspective. And so leaders are working through that. And I get it, it's well intentioned, but it's still ineffective.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to be harsh with that. We're just trying to say, don't waste your time, effort, and energy on something that's going to make the problem worse or make it silly with these gimmicks.
So one of the visuals that's on the front of the cover, and by the way, the cover here, and the decision point that's early on in this book is this question, and I'll let you tee it up and then respond. But it's this big question that we're asking, that you're specifically asking, we continue to ask ourselves and those that we work with, that gets at which path are you going to pursue and follow as a leader?
Yeah. Well, and if you can lock in on this question is what breaks open effectiveness. So why am I doing it and what am I going to do? And the question simply stated, and I want to tie into something I heard you say in a meeting last week, are you leading for impact or validation? Like, what's the motive? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? I mean, the number of times I've listened to a podcast and tried to learn something because I'm feeling insecure and I'm comparing myself. And I'm doing that for my own validation more than from a secure mindset trying to get better. Or at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I should text the team and tell them how much I appreciate them. And it's because I'm feeling insecure about something, not because I really am trying to appreciate them. And this isn't to get you navel gazing in a way that you're circular with analysis. It's a way to prompt a thought that sets you up for effective action.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you phrased it in that meeting this past week? So the setup is this: we were meeting with a real character-focused leader who'd done a lot of leadership development in that world and study, and come to a conclusion that it's almost like sometimes they're doing it to get something. And you remember what you said?
Yeah, I think I wrote it down somewhere, and I don't have the
Yeah.
exact phrasing, but essentially it was: are you leading to get, or are you leading to give?
Yeah, yeah. And what I loved about the way you connected the dots are some leaders are exhibiting character, whatever you would value, humility. And the language is you need to be humble to get the best from them, rather than humility allows you to give your best to them. And so it's really powerful because there's a lot of leadership that's veiled and cloaked under some of these values, but really is insidious. There's a deceptiveness to it. And that's the worst form of danger, especially in leadership development, when something masquerades as something that has light.
Yeah.
But it's really dark.
And it's all to manipulate to get something that you want.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So that question, it's a haunting question.
Yeah, it messes me up. I remember a number of years ago first encountering this question, but I had it. I didn't have the phrasing the way I have it today. And in that context, I was trying to build something, and I was doing the thing. Not that there wasn't more that I could do or more that I could learn. I didn't have it all figured out, but I was working. And I came face to face with this question, which essentially is, do you have to build it, Mark?
Mhm.
Or can you just participate in impact? And today that question gets translated now, evolved to, is this about your validation or is this about your impact? And Chris, I've yet to find a scenario where this question doesn't apply.
Mm.
Are you fathering? Are you leading a team? Are you coaching the kids' ball team? Are you husbanding
Mm.
for validation for yourself, what you can get, or for impact for others, what you can give?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It continues to mess me up.
Yeah, I mean, it for me is the gut check. It's throughout, and again, not in this like insecure navel gazing way. It's like, come back to center. Why are you doing this? What are you doing about it? And how are you paying attention to the way that you lead for impact or validation? And you might be okay for a while at the gym lifting up those dumbbells with a sloppy form, but eventually you're going to hurt your back. Recently experienced that in a fresh way, and it was such a powerful reminder that like the way you're engaging every moment has a deforming or reforming shaping impact to you. And so if you're not processing and paying attention and aware of this question, you will be in a spot at some point that the continual deforming, and you look up one day, and we have a way of wording this in the book, you're in a spot you don't want to be in, and it's this slow drift because it's a continual leading for validation.
Yeah. Foreshadowing a future conversation we're going to have.
Yeah.
So I think this question is often easier to understand than some of the other questions we're posing to the folks that we work with or the way we describe it. But let's not make any assumptions. Can you take us practically into a couple of examples of what it looks like to lead for validation, and maybe kind of paint a couple ends of the spectrum?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
I'll give some where the behavior changes and some where the behavior doesn't
Yeah.
because the motive stays the same.
Yeah.
But
Good.
I did
Good.
want to do this real quick. Back to your thing about like impact or validation. And when you were like, do I have to build this for my own validation? Think about how with our measurement tool, the IFQ, what we do with individuals and then what we do with companies, think about how A, getting it out, leading that, but B, the ways you've helped it innovate and move forward. Think about how many people you've impacted.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
every day, there are people that are being impacted by your innovation that, so anyway,
Yeah.
that just is
No, it's
just
great.
struck my brain in a fresh way.
Impact is greater because I was willing to let go of my need to build it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So 3 simple examples. One would be this, because I think a lot of people that are listening to this are at some level interacting with a team member. They're leading a team or they're on a team. So here's the thing I want you to think about. When that little thing pops up in you and you're like, I haven't talked to so-and-so forever. I need to check on them. This is the way to evaluate it. Okay, am I leading for impact or validation? I'm leading for validation. I need to check on them. Are they still engaged in a way that makes me feel like good about their support and their vision? I feel like they're in my corner and I need them to be in my corner, or I'm going to feel like, whatever. There's a lot of different things that you would look for validation. I want to go home and I want to feel like a champion and I want to feel like a winner. And if my team mirrors and matches my enthusiasm, they're in. So I need to check on that person, right? So that validation there is just right underneath the surface, but yet it's the energetic impulse to your brain that I need to take this action. Versus leading for impact, I haven't talked to them in a while. I need to see how they're doing. How's life? How's their engagement here? That's a part of it, but am I concerned about something? This is a one-to-one where we're having a confrontation around an issue, or it's developmental. How can I lead you better? So that is a simple way of seeing how the impulse to lead can be for validation or impact. The action stays the same, but the motive is different.
I love that.
A second one that comes to mind would be, this is something I played out recently just because we're entering into a new phase as a family. So a daughter moved out for her college apartment, 3 in college now. It's just a different world. Everybody's gone all the time. And, I just interacted with them in a way that, hey, we're in a new phase. Help me know if something shows up where I'm not in your world, I'm not aware, I'm not supportive, things I could do to be a better dad, let me know that. And that was a whole question to ask because my motive was I really want to be dialed in to serve them. On the other side, last night I was with my daughter, and I had done some work over the weekend, and they're gone all the time. But I asked for my own validation. Do you remember when you were little? Was I working or was I playing with you guys on the weekends and the evenings? She was like, "Oh, you were totally playing with us all the time. I can still remember after you'd put us to bed when we were little, you'd sit in the stairway and read and work." And I was completing my dissertation at the time. And I was like, "Dang, Mark, I feel validated. That was awesome." But I did it, and then I realized, I could have asked the same question just to check in, not for my own validation, but I want to see what stuck, right? And so there's an example there where you follow up with a team member, action stays the same, motive is different. There's an example where the actions are different based on the insecurity. I'm drawn to use a third example too, which would be, I think this ties a lot into how a lot of the people we work with, business owners and leaders, what's the horizon you're committing to? And I think a lot of leaders, if they're honest, are very worried about the lasting legacy they'll leave after they reach a certain point of success. And what I want to just offer to you is, are you leading for impact or validation? Because a lot of leaders, if you're leading for validation, you need a legacy to make you feel like you didn't waste all that effort. Versus, how can I strategically leave the best impact regardless of how I'm remembered? So I'm thinking about the leaders that we interact with, they achieve great success, they get to a great horizon, and then I've got to leave this legacy so I feel whole for my own validation, or who cares if they remember my name? It doesn't have to be on the building, and maybe it needs to be on the building for strategic reasons. But this is a legacy that serves you. You don't serve it.
Yeah.
And so that's where my mind goes for the third example.
I'm so glad you brought up motive, because for the discerning leader, that really is at issue here. It's not necessarily the action. Some of the examples you gave early on, the action can be the same regardless of the motive.
Yeah.
But only you can really check your motive. And unless you check your motive, only then can you know whether you're down the path of leading for your own validation or you're choosing to lead for impact.
Yeah. And most people have conditioned themselves to do things to keep themselves from noticing their motive. They didn't actively and consciously do that. But that, if you want to, I don't like to use a ton of psychological terms, but if you use a psychological term, it'd be a coping mechanism. What is a coping mechanism? It's something that keeps me from getting still and noticing introspectively the why behind my behavior. Because the why is unsettling. And I wish I could tell you, for some of you watching this, that the first time you start paying attention to the why, Care Bears shoot out of rainbows and there's joy all around you, it actually sometimes gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it kind of sucks.
Because, and this was the experience I had, when my 20-year-old was 17 years ago, when I first became aware, why am I taking my 3-year-old daughter out for lunch? Oh my gosh, I've done a lot of this for my own validation. So it's a little bit tough at first to really honestly stare this in the face, but on the other side of it is ever deepening freedom.
Yeah, it's great. So as we kick off this series to travel through this book, and we just kind of set the stage for the big ideas that we're going to tease out even deeper as we go through this, is there anything that hasn't been said yet that would be worthy of saying up front, even if we're going to say it again, maybe 100 times, that would be worthy of saying right up front before we go any further down the series?
Yeah, I think if I were to say something to help you engage on this series in a way that is going to be um, so transformative for you, it's this. Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook recently have come out and said it's not logical, linear thought that got me to my best decisions. It was intuitive insights. It was the intuitive leaps. Steve Jobs said the same thing. And I am saying to you this very directly. When you learn to pay attention to your motive and not be driven by it, but discern direction, you learn to cooperate with that greater intelligence and how to tap into it. Because again, most people are being pinged by the insecurities and the things they want validation for. If you can learn to not be driven by those, get underneath them, that's where you're going to learn to really tap into your raw horsepower, your creative intelligence, the leaps forward. And we all have access to that. Very few tap into it continually. Instead, they'll live a whole life based on a few moments of those insights. And we don't want to see that happen to you. Yeah. So join us for this series.
Yeah, cool. All right. So just a couple quick wrap-up items. If you want to get a copy of this book, it's on Amazon, or you can go to leadforimpactbook.com and find some more information there. And as we always close these episodes, if you want to learn more about what we do and how we can help you be a leader for impact, you can go to SightShift, SIGHT, shift.com, and there is always more there. All right, we're off and running. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, peace out, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this episode. There's always more for you at SightShift, SIGHT, shift.com, to be the leader you were meant to be.